We are now 20 episodes deep into our normal, and definitely not chaotic, Sims playthrough, and a lot has happened to our Sims over the episodes. Far too much in fact. So sit back and relax as I take you through all the shenanigans our Sims have been through that have led us going from this to this. Enjoy. Our family started off relatively small, with only 8 of us. Myself, Agatha, Plum, Livid, Jambur, Glaceon, Hyde, Havoc, and Corn, on a completely empty lot with not a penny to our name. We grafted and scrounged until we had enough simoleons to buy the necessary items required to live: a fridge, beds, shower, sink, and a piss bush that doubled up as a bed. Plum showed her prowess for gardening straight away and started bringing in some more money, to the point that we could actually afford an actual roof over our head so we didn't all freeze to death outside. She also managed to cultivate our first family pet, a cow plant, which would later be known as Utter Failure. Now semi-comfortable with the cramped, confined conditions we called a house, we agreed to let some more freeloaders stay over, and we welcomed to the family AJ, Christonius, Emily, and Damien, as well as our first 2 furry companions, Eris and Bluepaw. Now armed with jobs and an army of strawberry plants, we started to really pull in the money, and we were able to expand the house so all the furniture could actually fit inside it. And because we can't have anything nice, we broke everything and trashed the place immediately. Because things were going so well, we allowed even more freeloaders to come stay over, and we welcomed in Espy, Fok, Gimli, Blood, as well as a new Jambur. Yes, new Jambur. It was already time to put the original Jambur, renamed Old Jambur, out to pasture, which we did so gracefully by feeding her to Utter Failure. And to formally declare new Jambur as a household's only Jambur, she consumed the freshly milked essence of Old Jambur from the cow plant and became officially known as Jambur. It was at this point as well in which we first met the Grim Reaper, or Death as we called him, who after some flirtatious interactions from our resident flirt Gimli, he was also convinced to come stay with us. We also found out during our Sims' grievances what a talented painter that Jambur was, and so started a long lineage of Jambur painting and bringing in money. Well, painting when she wasn't tense, which wasn't often, and with more money coming into the household, the bigger the house actually grew. A sudden tremor shook the earth, and storm clouds started gathering. Trouble was brewing, but we would not know the sheer terror of what was coming until it was far too late. We adopted a new furry family member, Chris Dragons, who quickly became friends with Eris, who absolutely hated him. Then tragedy. Utter Failure passed away, and so stricken with grief, Death left the household. And that's when everything changed. It began to darken. The storm had come, and everything was about to change forever. Mr. Moist joined the household, and with him, he brought his games. Now with quite a big, busy household and things starting to go well with more money being brought in, we started to get more comfortable with each other and some relationships began to grow. Corn and AJ's relationship blossomed so quickly, before we knew it they were boyfriend and girlfriend, to then suddenly being engaged, and before we knew it they had eloped and were now a married couple. Emily and Hyde started their very long, complicated relationship together, a very much love-hate scenario for both of them. Havoc, being the romantic that he is, decided to become friendlier with Mr. Moist and struck up a relationship with him. But unfortunately for Havoc, Mr. Moist had a secret that stopped Havoc in his romantic tracks. It was just fate that the two had finally reconnected under these strange circumstances, but as it turned out, Mr. Moist was Havoc's long-lost father. We soon welcomed into the family Travis, Josephine, and Jeremy Musk, and in addition to that, we had accumulated enough wealth and materials to finally move out from our original small home lot to a brand new lot with a lot more space to expand as our family continued to grow. We redesigned our home and actually established some proper toilets and bedrooms, as well as putting the house on some stilts and giving it its signature green roof with a thick pink trim. Jambur officially retired from whatever job she was doing poorly at and became a full-time painter, and Plum quit her job as well to be our full-time gardener. creating the first saplings that would eventually grow into a massively profitable dragon fruit. It was becoming apparent that even with a larger house, there were far too many Sims and distractions for one particular individual, which caused him to become too tense to do anything. So to rectify this, we let Bluepot out of the house to go run amok with a new neighbourhood. That wasn't enough. There was still no painting. So the very first miniature Jambur pad was created in the back garden. Plum managed to cultivate some dragon fruit, and to protect them until they blossomed, we created a small greenhouse for them to grow in. So with the new fruit growing, and paintings now being created, money started flooding in. Nothing could possibly sour this mood. Well, until Bluepot decided he was hungry and that he was going to get taken away by a pet care worker. But no one messes with our household, no one takes away our playthings without a fight, so we forcefully added the pet care worker Mercedes to the household and immediately locked her away in a dark, secluded room. It was during this time that a stranger had wandered into the house and had made himself at home. Well, a stranger to some, but not Plum, as this was Patchy, Plum's scarecrow gardener helper, magically come to life. So we welcomed Patchy into the family, and it wasn't long after that which Mr. Moist took a liking to the masked scarecrow. The thrill and excitement of dark secrets they both kept gave them a strong bond, and so their horrible relationship started. It was after the house stopped shaking from the two new lovers going hard at it that we realised the distant cries of a trapped Sim had finally stopped. Mercedes, poetically, had starved to death. With the Grim Reaper showing up once again, Gimli immediately took the opportunity to convince him once again to come stay in the house, to which he agreed, and we once again welcomed Death back into the family. Plum, unsatisfied by not only being a superb gardener, decided she wanted to try her hand at some handiness around the house, and began repairing and upgrading the house's many broken items. The true MVP, most valuable Plum, was emerging. So we created her a much larger greenhouse to house all dragon fruit in, alongside a beautiful shrine to our departed friend, Other Failure. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, a certain non-painter was still being too tense when she came into the house from her miniature Jambur pad, so enough was enough. We expanded the Jambur pad and locked Jambur away by herself, with no distractions from other Sims or objects, just her own exclusive haven where she could paint in peace, and with some one-way windows for other Sims to see that she was still painting, of course. It was during this very expensive construction of the new Jambur pad that Livid had decided enough was enough, and they decided to overheat to death. So it was clear, we were now on a quest to revive Livid. We received a mysterious message from an unknown sender, telling us about a fabled, powerful artifact capable of bringing the dead back to life. But unfortunately, the artifact was rumoured to be hidden deep within a temple in the very dangerous jungles of Selva Dorada. But the promise of an artifact capable of bringing Livid back to life outweighed the risk, so we followed the message's instructions, and an expedition team travelled to the jungles. After gathering some supplies and knowledge of the temple from the local market, we ventured further into the jungle, fighting off dangerous swarms of insects and deadly traps. Unfortunately, one trap poisoned Agatha, but we bravely moved on. After hours of exploring, we came across an open-air bath in which we decided to stop and make camp at. Due to the sheer exhaustion of our expedition and the sickly effect of the poison dart, Agatha sadly drowned whilst bathing. Stricken with pure grief over the death of Agatha, Glaceon decided to jump in and drown himself as well. But the expedition team continued on their journey to the temple, with Plum, the now love-stricken widow, leading the way. As we approached the temple, a large jaguar attacked, but Plum, being as skilled as she is, fought it off, and in fact managed to stumble across a rather rare, rather expensive golden artifact that it was hiding. Hyde came across a treasure chest and opened it to find some small treasures, but unfortunately also a curse that caused him to become diseased, which would sadly eventually spread and infect the rest of the expedition. But eventually we found our way to the temple and we set up camp. Delirious from exhaustion and the disease, Plum, following suit to her late husband, went to bathe, and unfortunately she also succumbed to the waters and drowned, taking the golden artifact with her. we befriended two skeleton temple guardians, Ribby and Tarsus, who joined the team to help us solve the mysterious puzzles of the temple, and we ventured further down. Sadly, the disease had overtaken Hyde, and he too decided to go for a long swim, which he would never return from. We could only get so far down in the temple before a particular devious puzzle stopped us in our tracks, but we had been travelling for so long and our supplies had already long run out that Josephine sadly passed away from starvation, shortly followed by Mr. Moist. With the original expedition team now consisting of Jambur and Bluepaw, we gathered up the urns of the fallen and travelled back home, unsuccessful in our quest to find the artefact. Ribby remained in the jungles, but Tarsus elected to help us in our eventual quest to revive the dead Sims and became a permanent member of the family. Rumours of a magical portal that had appeared in Glimmerbrook started to spread amongst the Sims back in the house, with tales of a magical spell capable of bringing dead Sims back to life. So Blood and Bluepaw bravely decided to go investigate. They arrived in the dense forests of Glimmerbrook during the night whilst a storm was raging, so they took refuge in a local bar, where they came across some rather interesting characters, but were able to find out the location of this magical portal. At dawn, they left the bar and travelled to said location to find a portal, and they both bravely stepped through. Overwhelmed by her trip and surroundings, Blood continuously passed out trying to do the most simple of tasks, like speaking to the magical sages who would teach her the ways of magic. But eventually, after what seemed like an eternity, she gained enough strength to ask one of them, who, after some menial tasks, agreed and bestowed the ability for Blood to learn magic. And with that, the two headed home to practice their magical prowess. Whilst Blood and Bluepaw were away to their magical realm, the remaining family members had welcomed in some new faces, Cave Johnson and Chaos Palpatina. Blood began the painstaking journey of practicing her magic, and some of the ghost Sims started to appear from their collected urns and were subsequently welcomed back into the household. The family rejoiced at the fact their loved departed ones were back with them, even if it was in ethereal form, apart from one. Damien, the scoundrel, revelled in the fact that Mr. Moist had died during his brave trip to the jungles, but little did he know how powerful Mr. Moist truly was. Mr. Moist struck down Damien for his insolence in a violent lightning strike, and Damien, poetically, ended up becoming another ghost sim. The ghosts started to become restless, and soon found entertainment in being mischievous, subsequently starting to haunt and break objects around the house, including the jumper pad. And with the MVP out of action, there was no one around that could help repair these broken items. But through her prolonged training, Blood finally started to learn some spells, and was on her way to learning the magical spell capable of bringing these dead Sims back to life. Blood's magic learning progress was slow, ridiculously slow, so Tarsus stepped in to assist and also became a spellcaster. Due to having so many Sims dead, the household funds were drastically low, and overall mood of the house due to the ghost breaking everything was at an all-time low. We needed Jambur to continue painting, so we used the very little remaining reserves we had to expand out her pad further to ensure her comfort so she would continue painting. Tarsus, clearly with a knack for all things magical, really took his magical training to heart and soon surpassed Blood with his abilities, to the point he could appoint a familiar to help him with his magical studies. Bluepaw was this familiar, and with a quick spell, Bluepaw also became magical, even gaining the ability to speak, but Jambur was still too tense. With the very little money we had, our pad was upgraded once again, with everything a Sim could ever dream about having. All she had to do was paint. We needed money. Jambur was our only hope. That was until Gimli, who up until this point had been telling non-stop jokes, returned from work with a fresh new promotion to a showstopper. And with his promotion, he brought back an outrageous amount of money, which would tide the house over for quite some time. He was granted his own special dwellings within the house, and even supplied enough simoleons to once again upgrade the Jambur pad to let some more natural light into it, once again to help Jambur be less tense and continue painting. Blood and Tarsus both continued their magical training together and grew stronger and learned more abilities. We were getting closer to the spell. With the notion of being so close to learning the spell, Blood and Tarsus stepped up their training, pushing themselves to the limit. They trained daily, ignoring everything in the world, even their own personal welfare. They were determined. And then it happened. Blood pushed too far, and a spell backfired on her, killing her in the process. The house was at breaking point. The stress was boiling over everyone. The ghosts were destroying everything. We had hit crisis point. And then Tarsus did it. He mastered spellcasting and learned the spell required to revive the dead Sims, Dedethify. To ensure the spell would work properly, Tarsus summoned the ghost of Mercedes back and used a new spell on her. It worked, and she was brought back to life. Then Mr. Moist's ghost killed her again. But with the knowledge that the spell was working, it was finally time to revive all the dead Sims, which Tarsus did, and the household was once again reunited. Well, everyone, with the exception of Livid, who refused to come back to life as he wished to be a ghost for a little while longer, which we allowed. It was noticed, however, that a particular Sim's ghost could not be found. Damien was missing, but Mr. Moist told us of his location, and that Damien had taken up shelter in our original house. So we travelled to the house to find him, and find out the truth that Mr. Moist had been hiding from us this entire time. Not only had Mr. Moist struck down and killed Damien, but he had placed a curse upon him, changing him back to a toddler. His curse meant that Damien would be the only Sim to age, going from a toddler to an adult to an elder before finally succumbing to old age, only for the cycle to repeat forever. Mr. Moist would not be reasoned with, and so Damien rejoined the household, now a toddler, destined for a life of misery for insulting Mr. Moist. With the Sims now back properly in the household, Plum reminded us of the expensive artifact she had found in the jungle, to which Tarsus asked to see. With a flick of his bony wrist, Tarsus cast a copy-paste spell on the artifact, and it doubled. And he did it again, and it quadrupled. Tarsus had found a way to replicate the artifact that we could then sell for an unlimited amount of money. Everything was about to change. Until it didn't. We created a stunning new mansion with the money Tarsus made for us, with everything in it a Sim could ever want or dream about, racking up to a grand total of nearly 700,000 simoleons for it. But we needed to earn the mansion first, not cheat our way there using a magical, talking, necromantic skeleton capable of copying valuable artifacts to make money. So we continued on in the same house, now with a clear goal ahead of us. We uncovered some new fresh faces whilst creating the new house and welcomed in Lauren, Jude and Wispy. Mr. Moist's curse had far-reaching consequences than any of us had first thought. We all now had to suffer Damien as a needy toddler. Jamburs' paintings were still bringing in some good money, but not enough. But fortunately for us, however, the magic in the air from reviving so many dead Sims had some lingering effects, and old Jambur, yes, the one eaten by utter failure, was also revived. We welcomed old Jambur back to the family, and immediately locked her in the Jambur pad. We once again upgraded the Jambur pad, giving it a basement where we placed some more easels for both Jamburs to now go paint. Our resident alien mother, Korn, took it upon herself to be the primary caretaker of Damien and set about trying to teach him the ways of the world, setting him up for potential success. With Korn's full attention now all on Damien, she became neglectful of her husband AJ, and their relationship took a massive spiral downwards, and sadly they both divorced. Some more relationships bloomed within the household, however, with Gimli and Death growing even closer together, and even the Jamburs started taking a liking to each other. Far too much of a liking to each other, in fact. As things had been so stressful recently, it was finally time for us to go on vacation, and where better to go than straight back into the jungles to finally properly explore that temple. After passing some traps and clearing the way forward, we finally made it to the bridge by the romantic waterfalls and set up camp for the evening. Unfortunately, the sheer excitement of being near the romantic waterfalls in Plum was far too much for Agatha, and he passed away from overheating. Fortunately though, that's where Tarsus saves the day, now being able to resurrect Sims on command, so we continued our expedition. Jambur accidentally set off a trap in the jungle and became poisoned, but put on a brave face as we were close to the temple. We finally reached the temple and solved its puzzles with ease, climbing further down into it until we finally reached the treasure room. We collected the very rare, expensive artifact and returned home triumphantly. Agatha, with his passion for all things robotic, took on the task of creating some utility bots that could be used to help clean the house for us, and Corn tried to continue teaching Damien some useful life skills, but was unsuccessful in doing so due to her getting bored too easily. So Mr. Moist stood in, using his skills as a babysitter to help teach Damien instead. And then tragedy. The poison overwhelmed Jambur, and she passed away within her pad, right in front of old Jambur. Tarsus tried to resurrect her, but the poison was too strong. It killed her instantly again, and again, and again. He couldn't resurrect Jambur. And the final nail in the coffin came from an accident with Agatha creating the utility bots. He accidentally electrocuted himself and passed away once again. At least Tarsus was able to revive Agatha once more, and this time the entire household decided that they needed a proper vacation from all that we had been through recently. So we set our sights on the sunny beaches of Sulani. Everyone had a wonderful time on the beaches, relaxing, having fun, and getting on with one another. Bluepot demonstrated his magical prowess, being able to summon a dolphin, and Havoc really took a shining to the waters. Nothing could ruin this moment. What a wonderful vacation. We decided to move away from the beach to a bar on the other side of the island, and we were swiftly greeted by Death himself when over half of the family drowned in the ocean. It was beautiful. Tarsus collected the floating urns of the dead, whilst Cave explored a cave, finding many mysterious objects that would act as a reminder of our wonderful trip to Sulani, and with that, we headed home. Sometime later, Tarsus was able to revive all the fallen Sims, and after striking a deal with Mr. Moist, we were able to play The Sims again, with the condition that our household be split between two homes. So some of the Sims moved to a new modern house just down the street from our current one, and would live close by as neighbours. But remember the mysterious objects Cave found within the caves of Sulani? Well, one of those items was some mermaidic kelp, of which Havoc snatched up the opportunity to become a mermaid with by consuming it. Whilst we waited on Havoc becoming a mermaid, we went straight back to trying to teach Damien some more life skills, such as thinking, having him, "What's that?" every object he could find. But this task proved difficult for Damien, due to the other Sims clearly fed up of his tantrums, leaving him outside in his high chair in the rain at night in the dark. But soon it was finally time for Havoc's transformation, so alongside Bluepaw, Havoc travelled back to the oceans of Sulani, stripped down to be at one with nature, and strode deep into the waters, instantly becoming the majestic mermaid he was always meant to be. To celebrate Havoc's transformation, we created a swimming pool at the back of the house for him, which went right through a newly renovated Jambur pad, which was now known as a Jambur complex. Everything in the world once again made sense. We were back on a money-making venture after our recent expenditures within the house, so we decided to follow some Sims to their work to see what they did for a living. First on the list would be Emily, who up until this point had been taking numerous acting and performing auditions. But before we could do that, the Jamburs decided to set their newly expensive decorated Jambur complex on fire, and Damien was about ready to age up with his new amazing life skills. Some cake shenanigans later, and Damien was finally able to blow out his birthday candles, only to be quickly whisked away to safety by child services. Happy birthday, Damien! Gimli, in hysterics by Damien being taken away, died drowning in the new pool from laughing too much. Tarsus to the rescue once again. After all of this, we were finally able to follow Emily to our audition, only for her workers to be on strike, but not telling her, so no one showed up for her job. So we stole some items from the set and we came back home. Determined to still see what Sims did at their jobs, we followed our resident doctor, Lauren, to the hospital and spent the vast majority of our time there eating snacks and complaining to our co-workers, and then came back with a nice fat paycheck. Whilst we waited for Hyde to start work, Bluepaw decided to show off his dolphin summoning techniques to a vampire neighbour, and we all put in our tickets to win the lottery, and something rather miraculous happened. Other failure had come back to life. We are unsure to this day if it was due to the gardening utilibots bringing the cow plant back to life, or if it was Bluepaw's summoning techniques,
or the fact we had to restart the entire game after the Sulani incident, but for whatever reason, Other Failure was alive and back with us. We finally followed Hyde to work as a detective and found out that all he does is strip down to his swimwear and flirt with the locals and annoy his fellow co-workers by releasing the prisoners at the police headquarters. But they were still fine paying him for all of this. Strange. But really, all of this was trivial compared to the real elephant in the room. Damien was still missing. And we knew exactly which family had adopted him. So Corn, Damien's adoptive mother, went to pay them a visit. Rumours around the neighbourhood of our household's antics had circulated, and the family was prepared for his arriving, unfortunately swiftly taking out Corn with a knife to the head. But you don't mess with our household. Oh no, you do not. Mr. Moist and Gimli made sure of that very quickly. With Damien back in the household and Corn revived, it was time to try celebrate his birthday once again. Unfortunately, the electric company had other plans and had turned off the power to the house, so we couldn't make the cake. And then we also found out that we didn't win the lottery. Eric Lewis did. So we invited Eric over and Livid took their frustrations out on him before Emily finally ended his life with a sharp swing of a bat to the head. And now that the power was back on, we could finally make the cake and celebrate Damien's birthday properly as he aged up from a toddler to a child. With absolutely nothing wrong at all with anyone or any place, we continued our money-making ventures, still with the sights on following Emily to her audition for an actual successful work outing. But as we waited on her audition date, we had herself and Corn pick up some odd jobs, which involved cleaning up Sulani's beaches, where we met some rather rude locals. Back home, Mr. Moist had a bit of a wardrobe malfunction, and Agatha and Plum decided to go on a romantic break to the city, where they just ended up stealing some items and woohooing in the park. But enough time had now passed for us to follow Emily to her audition, where her workers had finally stopped striking so we could actually see her perform. And what a performance she gave. Emily sung with a voice like an angel and played the guitar like a professional. She was superb, but her boss did not think so, and this upset Emily. And as said before, you never, ever mess with our household. Our money-making venture had been going so well, we had now ended up with over 200,000 simoleons to our name. Remember, this was all from starting with absolutely nothing. And that's you lot now pretty much up to date with our Sims journey so far, and boy what a ride it's been, with no signs of it slowing down anytime soon. I think in the future we'll make some nice investments and see if we can increase our household wealth, and maybe one day we'll finally be able to afford our dream house. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.